Hello and welcome back to Triple Double, brought to you by Double Clutch. We're coming to you from right here in the world famous London Camden's Market, and we are in the bench warmer shop. And to my left is Sammy the bench warmer Gunnell, and to his left is Nick Whitfield, who was no nickname Nick last week, but I've since found out his nickname is in fact the Encyclopedia. Up there from you. Nice one. So everyone's recovered from last week's festivities, or last episode's festivities. Still angry?
I'm furious.
Furious.
I'm furious.
Excellent. Furious.
I've been angry all day. So
For me,
should be a great show.
The celebrations went on really late. I was embraced a shirtless lifestyle like J.R. Smith.
Parade through the city.
Yes, there was a parade through Bagshot Village. It was magnificent.
I think I heard you coming today. Actually, it was the
Incredible
trumpets.
scene.
And
Excellent. So if you missed the last episode, make sure you check it out. You can get it on YouTube. This week's episode, we're going to have another great debate for you, and it's going to be on the greatest rookie seasons ever. So it's quite an apt topic given the Donovan Mitchell, Ben Simmons debate that's been going on so far this season. We're going to have 3 rounds as we did last week. The first round is going to be the arrival, so it's how these guys came into the league, what sort of hype they came with them. The second round is going to be the impact, what they did in their rookie season. And the third round is going to be the legacy, so their overall career success. Sammy, who are you going to go with?
I'm going to go with no other than Shaquille O'Neal. I could never just say his name just normally. I have to say it like that. So.
That's going to be a long episode then.
Hopefully I won't have to say it too many times. Let's just go with Shaq.
Shaq, cool. Okay, Shaq, good choice. Nick, who are you going to go with?
So, controversially, I've gone with a guy who didn't even win Rookie of the Year.
You're going to get
Good
battered.
start.
Going to get battered.
You might retract
Simple.
it when I tell you that person is Magic Johnson.
Okay.
Okay, interesting.
Fair
Another good
dues,
choice.
fair dues.
Another good choice. Okay, so as with the last episode, I will pick the winner of each round, and then the winner will, at the end, either retain or steal the triple double crown. So round 1, the arrival, and we're going to go losers out. So Sammy to go first. The arrival of Shaq.
I'd prefer to use the word second place to start with. But the arrival of Shaq was a big deal. He was, think in terms of, for those younger viewers out there, LeBron James, highly anticipated. Loads of people knew who he was before he got into the NBA. That was Shaq. He was the original of that. People were like, who is this guy? Who is this 7'1" beast who has just been dominating? How will he dominate in the NBA? There was a big fanfare, a big hype. Unquestionably going to be the number 1 pick. He was a hugely hyped up, hugely anticipated player.
Pretty decorated college career at LSU.
He did. He wasn't, he didn't win like big kind of things like titles and stuff, but he got he was a 2-time All-American, and he did get the NCAA Player of the Year in 1991. So he was definitely, already a household name before he came into the league.
Snubbed for the dream team.
He was snubbed. Christian Laettner. Hate that guy.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? So yeah, but he was the definition of hype. Definition of hype coming into the league.
Okay, Nick.
So, let's put Magic Johnson in context. We're looking at a time...
What's context?
Now, we think of high school players now as being celebrities. Back in the late 70s when Magic Johnson played, that wasn't the case. These were guys who, unless you kind of grew up watching them or you lived in the same town, you didn't know who these guys were. And Magic Johnson was someone who, first of all, his nickname is Magic Johnson. He picked up that nickname when he was 15 years old. This is a guy, you want to talk about winning? This guy, he won the state championship in high school. He averaged something crazy like 30 and 18, I think it was, at high school. He's considered the best high school player ever to come out of Michigan. He then goes to Michigan State, has a crazy freshman year. In his sophomore year, they win the NCAA title. And also, if you go back to that crazy night in Salt Lake City, the final of the NCAA tournament that year, still to this day, it's the most watched college basketball game of all time. And it was the start of a rivalry that would actually revitalise the NBA, which was a league that was struggling at that time. So can either of you guys tell me who he played against in that game for the first time?
Larry Bird.
There we go.
Don't
And so-
test us.
And so it's
Your
the,
encyclopedic knowledge.
it's the start of that rivalry. And so Magic Johnson, he wins high school. He has 1 year at college, and he wins the NCAA the next year. Insane.
Not even just Larry Bird, the undefeated at that point Sycamore.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's the start of Magic Bird. That's a pretty big thing. But how much of that is Magic and how much is Bird versus this is all of Shaq?
It's true. Who is also the size of two men combined.
Who was Shaq's competition
Ever.
Competition.
at college? Considering he
college.
didn't win a title.
Oh,
Christian
well,
Laettner.
on his own.
Duke Blue Devils.
Considering Christian
Well, he had-
Laettner was
he-
winning at college.
And he did have competition on his own team. You know, he was kind of second to Stanley Roberts and Chris Jackson, as he was known at the time.
And you're going to ask me whether Larry Bird was a worthy opposition.
I'm not gonna ask you that. Are you gonna ask him that, Mike?
I know Larry Bird was a worthy opposition. They were undefeated. This was
Exactly.
for me. This is it was the start of Bird and Magic. Pretty soon, you know, the Lakers and Boston was already a thing, and it revitalised that. You're right. The NBA was struggling. Games were on tape delay. The playoffs were on tape delay. That's horrific.
But also, you know, Shaq did have a good high school career. You know, state championships and all that sort of stuff. He left college early. You know, he entered the NBA early, and you know, Chris Jackson, yeah, he had a good career. It was okay. Stanley Roberts, not so much, but nothing compared to Shaquille O'Neal. And they had nothing compared to the fanfare and the hype that he enjoyed coming into the league.
I think just as a final point, I think one of the interesting points about Shaq for me is the role that Reebok played in kind of signing him up and helping kind of push the hype. And you have to remember that Magic didn't have any of that, and yet he had that hype anyway, even without a big corporate machine behind him.
That's true.
Okay, so I've made my decision. I feel like Alan Sugar when I say that.
Yeah. I feel tense when you say it.
So for me, despite the fact it was in the 70s, it's still talked about now. The before the NBA story is still such an integral part of it. I've got to go Magic had the better hype coming in. And I'm going to move my seat further away from Sammy.
No, I think it's fair. I think it's fair. But, you know, the next two rounds will, determine the real winner.
They will indeed.
See who's the loser out next
Okay,
time.
so 1-0 to Sammy. We'll be back after this short break for round 2.
1-0 to Sammy, yeah? Correct.
Well, or not, actually. I'll take it back. You could have got away with that. You could have got a sweep, potentially.
I would have been all over that.
1-0 to Nick. We'll be back after this short break for round 2. Stay tuned.
Hear the sound of the bells when the love gone, and the voice when the war's on. Thirsty when the doors put their paws on. You gon' tell them that they go a little bit of clothes on. Put them on the battlefield, really ignorant, tryna miss what I said. Commands, put a purse on them, get them wild.
Play it on the world's most powerful console.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the Triple Double right here on livebasketball.tv. It's 1-0 to Nick in the debate of who had the greater rookie season, Magic Johnson or Shaquille O'Neal. So we're moving on to round 2, which is the impact. So how did they take the league by storm? And we're coming to you first, Nick.
Cool. So as I already mentioned, the interesting thing about Magic Johnson's rookie year is that he was kind of beaten by Larry Bird to the Rookie of the Year award. But what that kind of actually means when you look back at it is you kind of question whether it was the right decision. So Magic was joining a Lakers team with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who already at that point was the leading ever career scorer in the NBA. But he'd been struggling in the playoffs, and he wasn't able to win a championship for the Lakers. He won at the Bucks at that point, but not with the Lakers. So Magic goes on to average near enough a triple-double. He gets voted in as a starter for the All-Star game. The Lakers go all the way to the finals, and they play Philly and Dr. J, and the Lakers find themselves up 3-2, and Kareem gets injured, so he can't play. So Game 6, you have Magic Johnson leading the Lakers, and what happens? They actually start him at centre. So he's played point guard all season, and they start this guy playing at centre. And I'm going to shamelessly read his stat line from that game because I don't want to disrespect it. So Game 6, a clinching game, he goes for 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 steals, and becomes the only, and obviously wins the game, and becomes the only rookie ever to win Finals MVP. So we now look at his career trajectory of high school championship, college championship, first year in the NBA championship.
You're all about context. So you've given us some context, but I don't think you've given us the full picture. This is a Lakers side where Kareem wins the MVP that year. Mm-hmm. So how much of this average triple-double is actually just dropping the ball into Kareem for the unstoppable sky hook, that sort of thing? I'm playing devil's advocate.
It's a great point.
But if you also, and I'll kind of elaborate more on this later, but he also, when you look at footage of Kareem now and his mobility or lack thereof, Magic's also installing a Showtime offense, a fast break style. This is something systemic to how he plays and what he brought to that team. So if they were a half-court team and he was just dumping it into the post, I'd agree with you. But this is a guy who is actually completely changing the way they play as well and bringing the best out of all the other guys.
So what do you think it is then that he only got 4.5% of the Rookie of the Year votes? That's just not getting beaten by Bird. That is getting stomped into the ground.
So I think being on the same team as Kareem will kind of play into that. But there's also socio kind of political factors.
Okay.
So I'm going to do it. I'm going to play the race card. I think in that period of time there was, and that's how that Larry Bird, Magic Johnson kind of relationship was perceived by a lot of people at that time. You can ask a lot of people around the league at that time, they think that played into it. And that's why I think a lot of the kind of comments you saw coming out of the Detroit Pistons around that time about Bird and those sorts of things, that's where that came from, because there was a cultural and political divide in the league that you kind of don't necessarily see in the same way now.
Sammy, Shaq, beat that.
I'm sweating here.
Perspiration.
Perspiration again. This is outrageous. All right, so let me draw for some stats now. First of all, he had all this pressure on him. Pressure even more so because if you compare the 90s with, Magic Johnson's rookie year, you had all this media coverage. The NBA, even from then, had kind of just catapulted into this multimedia juggernaut where it was TV, it was, as you said, Reebok, endorsements. And so the pressure was even more so on his shoulders. And he lived up to that hype like 100%. If you imagine in his first week, I think he was the first rookie in NBA history to get Player of the Week. Not Rookie of the Week or anything like that. Player of the Week in the NBA in his first 7 days in the league. He was Rookie of the Year. He was an all-star starter as well. But also his points were amazing. He had 23.4 points across the season, 13.9 rebounds, 3.5 blocks. So he had a good career. He also in Orlando's his first season with Orlando, they didn't quite make the playoffs. They just made it. But if you consider the season before that, they'd only got something like 20 wins or something like that. So he basically doubled their wins throughout that season. Also, kind of bearing in mind his impact was he was one of the heaviest players to ever play in the NBA. And when you look at, you're right in that, Magic Johnson was a versatile player. like amazingly, and he was kind of a blueprint for versatile players in today's league. But Shaq also, we kind of underestimate his versatility as well. He was a 7-foot guy.
Agile.
He was agile. I think it might have even been his first game when, you know, he had that famous play where he took the rebound. You know, Shaquille runs the floor, takes it all the way, which I love. You know, it echoes around my childhood brain. And you know, he could handle the ball. He could put the ball on the floor. He could do it all. And you know, his impact was huge in that, you know, first season as well.
Okay, so he got 98% of the Rookie of the Year votes. Though. Yeah. I'm going to give a bonus point.
Unanimous. Unanimous. Let's just call it unanimous.
Who got the other 2% bonus point? You're wearing the team's top.
Larry Johnson. No, Alonso Mourning.
There you go.
I said it first.
Okay. Okay. Not only did he do that, he came 7th on the MVP for that season. Yeah, they were 41 and 41, came in 9th, but tied the same record as the 8th seed Pacers. And he was just a beast.
He was, and I would go as far as to say that in his rookie season, he changed the way that centre position was played and perceived, to the point where other teams had to build their squad around that 5 position. They had to build their squad to try and defend Shaquille O'Neal because he was such a dominant force.
I like the argument you made about the timing. So obviously compared to the 70s with the tape delays, this was post-Dream Team. Mm-hmm. The world has caught on to sort of Jordan fever, Team USA, and he's out there in front of everyone. Okay, you got any points you want to add on Shaq and Nick?
Yeah, I think Shaq was dominating when he came in, and I think one of the things I liked about Shaq's rookie year was this was an NBA, this was a centres league, and now if you go back and watch the games where he's playing against guys like Patrick Ewing or David Robinson, those guys who were really kind of thought of as the best guys in the league, even now when you watch him, he is dominant. He is going over and through those guys, and they're shooting mid range. They're kind of staying outside.
Are you conceding this round?
I'm not, but I just it's I like to watch him play. It was a sick season.
It was.
Okay, so both stellar seasons, but I think the fact that he didn't have an MVP with him, he wasn't his hype wasn't. I'm going to use the word inflated, and it's not the correct word. His hype wasn't inflated by having a rival. You know, there wasn't that back and forth media story. Shaq, beast, absolute unit.
The Diesel.
Shaq Daddy.
Diesel.
Terrible rapper.
Well, yeah.
We'll get onto that maybe.
Yeah,
Who knows?
maybe we'll come on to that.
He's better than me, I'll be honest.
That's actually something I'd like to see. So let's go straight on to round 2 goes to Sammy. So it's 1-1. We're tied 1-1 once again. It all goes down to the legacy. So we're going beyond the rookie year, the overall career successes of these guys. Sammy, you can kick us off.
With pleasure, Mike. How do I want to? So, you caught me off guard there. Now, basically, Shaq. When we think about Shaq's legacy, Shaq was an absolute beast. His legacy goes beyond the court. But let's talk about the court for a moment. Shaq broke baskets on numerous occasions. We saw it in Phoenix. We saw in his famous Inside Stuff interview with Ahmad when he rips it down. And
I thought he was going to injure himself.
I know. I thought
I didn't think he was going
to. Yeah,
to.
if not dropping on the floor, getting glass in your face.
Yeah.
And then famously ripping the whole basket down in New Jersey, his hometown, by the way. Technically, he lived in a few places. To the point where the manufacturers even had to redesign the hoops. So Shaq has been responsible for the redesigning of the apparatus in the NBA. We talked about opposing teams having to have a strategy. Even off the court, a rapper, as you mentioned before, a movie star.
Not a rapper.
Yeah, a video game star.
Shazam,
possibly the worst video game of all time.
Shafu.
Which became a cult classic. We've talked about his off-court achievements, let's call them, and now let's take it back on the court and his legacy and his impact and everything he did as a player. And it's impressive, I think you'll find. 4-time NBA champion, 3-time Finals MVP, shockingly only one season MVP, but that's, perhaps...
Shout out to Steve Nash.
Shout out to Steve Nash. And, Shaq himself has said that he's basically been robbed by Steve Nash for arguably 2 seasons. 15-time All-Star. Basically, every time he was healthy, he was an All-Star. 8-time NBA first team, 2-time second team, 4-time third team, 3-time All-NBA second team. I should have probably left that one out. NBA Rookie of the Year, we've mentioned. 2-time scoring champion. He was obviously named 50th greatest players of all time in 1997, which is a huge achievement considering he'd only been in the league for a couple of years at that point. Had his number retired by 2 teams, the Lakers and the Heat. Won the FIBA World Championship 1994.
That's scraping
I think that's pretty good. I loved that 1994 championship. It was legendary.
Christian Laettner won the Olympics.
He did.
If you're USA,
Shaq won 96.
And Shaq won in 1996, so he's also a Olympic gold medalist. Add that to your list. He's got a couple of statues. One at Staples Center, which is a great one. And then also he's got one at his at LSU as well. So 2 statues. That's pretty good in itself.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. What you got, Nick?
Can you argue with that, Nick?
I think I can.
Good, because that would have been rubbish.
Yeah, it would have been a real anticlimax.
Yeah, you win.
So looking at kind of accolades and stuff, I'm not going to list off everything Magic Johnson's ever done, but in terms of like the major things, 3-time MVP, 5 championships, 12-time All-Star, 12 including when you consider the years he missed for health reasons, is incredible. He retired as the career assist leader. And also his legacy is measured in terms of ever since he played, any time there's a fast break team, they get compared to his teams because he pioneered that style of play in the NBA. So when you hear Showtime, you know what it means and you think of Magic Johnson. He was kind of the leader and the voice of the Dream Team, which is arguably the most iconic basketball team ever. And to make some serious points, while kind of like you brought up Shaq Fu and statues, when you look at Magic Johnson's legacy, you have to remember the kind of the ignorance surrounding HIV at that time and the incredible work he's done in terms of educating people and being a role model. Also as a businessman, in terms of like his investments he makes in poor areas that traditional investors are not necessarily willing to do based on risk. Magic Johnson's invested heavily in those sorts of areas. And so his off-court legacy for me is kind of like, it's beyond commercial and it's beyond the basketball court. So that's why I kind of think Magic Johnson's legacy is kind of stands on its own.
Yeah, good point. However, I would also argue that Shaquille O'Neal, famously, he continued his education even after kind of leaving his college career early, which was a great example. And he's got a degree, I think it's in business or something like that. And he's also an excellent businessman. He's where other players over the years, obviously had a good career from kind of beginning to middle, but like you've got other guys who famously went bankrupt or threw their money away. Shaq has always invested well. He's always had good kind of investments, good business decisions.
The all-time leader in insulting Charles Barkley as well.
He is, yeah. The feud continues.
Google me, Chuck.
Google me, Chuck. Even till recently, yeah. But yeah, a really good businessman and a great role model, I'd say, for a lot of kids. And obviously just continues,
You guys are fighting for this.
But his personality continues, He was a funny guy, great character, as Magic Johnson was and is as well. But that has continued, to the point where we're still familiar with Shaquille O'Neal today. He's a very popular pundit. He's someone who, we listen to his opinion.
Let's see if the Lakers are able to land a star this coming off season as well, and then maybe we're still measuring Magic's legacy.
That's true, but any big man in the league, when we talk about the most dominant player in NBA history, there's no question. It's always got to be Shaquille O'Neal.
I believe Bill Russell has.
I don't think he was as dominant as Shaquille O'Neal.
Not those 11 championships.
But I mean, in terms of power and just being
he
able
can't fit them all on two hands.
But like physically dominant.
In pure strength, yeah.
In pure strength and power. Yeah.
both deserved choices. Absolutely, you've made this really difficult. I'm gonna have to mull this over for 30 seconds while I
Take
try.
your time.
Yeah, it's a big one. Magic Johnson, five NBA titles. Shaq 4, but imagine if Shaq had carried on with the Lakers, how many could they have won there? Then if we talk about sort of supporting casts, he stopped Kobe from getting Finals MVPs. Magic, 3 Finals MVPs. Okay. Oh no. And I'm also worried if I pick Magic that Sammy's going to stab me or something.
Don't worry about it.
I think, in terms of, they're both top 10 talent easily. But if I think who I'd want on my team, I think it might be Shaq. I don't think anyone can. I think Shaq was peerless.
Fearless.
An error has been made here today.
That's a controversial decision.
It is quite controversial.
But that guy would give me nightmares.
Yeah, that's right. Can you say it, please, Mike?
The winner of this week's debate, Sammy the Benchwarmer Gunnell.
Probably lifting that off screen, but you get the idea. Thank you, Mike. I'd like to thank all my fans. Thank you, Nick. I would like to say, actually, that this was hard.
That was really hard.
Magic Johnson, although, I loved Shaq's rookie career, Magic Johnson is one of my favourite players of all time. Just his assists alone, when I watch them now in 2018, blow my mind.
And I think it was interesting what you were saying earlier, and I completely agree, where Magic is a template for the versatile players you see now. Arguably, he was the first unicorn.
He was.
And I think MJ was a complete, as in Michael Jordan, was a complete aberration in terms of how good he was. And you saw players try and imitate him afterwards in terms of Kobe and Iverson and people like that. But actually, we've kind of reverted back to Magic now in terms of what the template for the best basketball player is.
Yeah,
Totally.
Simmons this year gets compared a lot
Absolutely.
to Magic.
Yeah. And
But
even
is that because there is no one who could compare to Shaq?
that's possibly
Physically,
true.
yeah. In terms, no one's combined that size and power
I
and
love-
athleticism.
I love the way we decided on Shaq, and now
But then
we're just-
equally,
yeah.
They're just toys.
so then equally, those guys right now in the NBA can't get on the court. So
It's true, and we're not. It's not a big man's league anymore. So maybe if it was a big man's league, we would be drawing for Shaquille O'Neal a bit more. It's a versatile players game. So LeBron is like a Magic Johnson-esque, perhaps more dominant, like Shaq. When I remember when Penny Hardaway first came, they were comparing him to Magic Johnson as well. Those big guys who were versatile. So yeah, you gotta love Magic.
Okay, so that's the end of the debate. We're going to take one more quick break. Once we're back, though, we're going to have a new segment for you, so stay tuned. See you in a minute.
Wait, what did you say?
The Los Angeles Lakers select.
Welcome to the Mad Ants, son.
It's my team. It's never going to be yours.
Knock it off!
Let's see who scores the most points tonight.
Enough talk. Let's play.
You just tried to run before you could crawl. The question is, are you up for it? You can't learn it. It's just in there, piece of the soul.
I can make this set fire to social
Hey,
media.
Marcy, you got to read on my lunch?
The classic 2K.
We're all here to have fun. I'm having a great time. That is the difference between a player and a legend.
I know he's going to help you, but you're in my way.
What's your name?
Play it on the world's most powerful console.
Hello and welcome back to the Triple Double, right here on livebasketball.tv, and we've got a new segment for you. It's Show and Tell, and we're going over to Mr. Sammy Gunnell for some interesting little gadgetry.
Hello. Yeah, it's something exciting this week. We've been talking a little bit about Shaquille O'Neal earlier, and Shaquille O'Neal was, I would like to say, the king of memorabilia in the early days. And this is a personal favourite of mine. You've got the Shaq figure, and it came with the basket and the ball.
Good combo.
It is a good combo, and I think you should hold this actually, Nick, and perhaps Mike, you can give a shot, because this is actually the shooting.
Do you just pull the trigger down?
Just pull the trigger.
I don't know how to hold him without.
It's all right.
Seeing as this is Shaq, I feel like I should defend my face, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was right. That was a nice
cool. So a fun fact about this, it came out in about 1993, before Shaq really had any sort of reputation as being good or bad at any particular things. So most of the other figures were like miniature, and they were like dunking figures and stuff like that. You could get him hanging on the rim. The stuff that he's... Oh, it's just under there. The stuff that he's famous for. But this one, they decided to do a deluxe model, and unfortunately... And so it's bigger than the rest of them. But unfortunately, they decided to call it the sharpshooter model, which I don't think Shaq has ever been called that in his whole NBA career.
Check out the form.
The form is amazing. The form is amazing. He's got the follow through. The concentration on his face is immense. He's even got the Reeboks.
No fluidity in the wrist.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, the Reeboks are solid.
Without really kind
of... Do you know
of
what I also like is the yellow shorts make me think of Blue Chips, the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again, that was actually a good Shaq movie.
Yeah,
that was.
Blue Chips.
Yeah. 1993, so that's
93. Yeah, it's a rookie thing. So they hadn't clocked how bad he was actually going to be at free throws and how ironic this was going to be. And then the basket is just unbelievably sick. For him to go with just the basket in itself is a great prop. But yeah, one of the many reasons why I love Shaquille O'Neal with all my heart.
Do you know, another thing I like is the logo at the time that appeared on his Reeboks, which for like a fraction of a second there was kind of like really recognizable. In like, I'm not going to compare it to Jordan, but it had the same kind of feeling of like you knew whose shoes it was as soon as you saw that.
It was so good, and this is basically kind of what his statue is now, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it did. They hit the nail on the head with that one, I think, with his logo.
Agreed.
I'm going to share a personal story as well. When I once went to a shop and I was buying the Shaqs, and I was really excited. And someone, the guy in the shop, I don't know why he did it, but he picked up the shoe and he looked at the logo and he perfectly described it. It was Shaq doing his business.
Business. So
which it works on multiple levels. So. I always remember that phrase, and that's what it makes me think of when I see that. I think of Shaq doing his business.
You just ruined it for me.
We've got two segments now, haven't we? We've
ruined
got
everything.
Show and Tell with Sammy and Story Time with Nick Whitfield.
I like that.
That's awesome. No, thank you for sharing that.
Well, thanks for being involved.
Thanks for being
in the nostalgia.
Cool. All right, so that's it from us for this episode, but we'll be back very shortly with another episode. Make sure you are following livebasketball.tv on all the different social media platforms. Make sure you're following Sammy on it's on Instagram. It's at the bench warmer or warming the bench.
At warming the bench.
At warming the bench. Make sure you're following Double Clutch at Double Clutch UK. And that's on all social media as well. We'll see you soon.